The little girl's cries echoed across the wide stone driveway, her small hands pressed against the ground as if clinging to the last thread of hope. Her knees trembled beneath her frail frame, her lavender dress clinging to her skin, damp with both sweat and tears. Above her, the scorching sun glared down, and beside her loomed the sharp shadow of her own mother, towering, elegant, and yet utterly cold. The girl's voice cracked as she begged for mercy, her words spilling out like shattered glass. "Please, Mommy, please stop." At that very moment, a sleek black car rolled up the path, halting just as the desperate plea hung in the air. The man inside had not planned to stop. He had 1,000 other things on his mind, but something in the sight before him made his heart jolt violently. What he witnessed would change not only the little girl's life, but also his own. Glowing star, before we dive deeper into this powerful story, I want to pause and ask you, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion to change lives, then please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel Kindness Glow. Your support helps us spread more heart-touching stories to the world. Glowing star. The story began weeks before that fateful day. The little girl's name was Lila, a fragile yet bright-eyed child of just 9 years old. Life had not been fair to her. She was born with a condition that made it difficult for her to walk without help. Sometimes she used a wheelchair, other times she pushed herself to take painful steps. Her father, who had once been her protector and hero, had passed away the previous winter. His sudden absence left her world shattered, and in that void, her mother, Veronica, grew colder by the day. Veronica had always valued appearances over love. With her sharp red dresses, high heels that clicked against marble floors, and her obsession with wealth and status, she struggled to see her daughter as anything but a burden. To her, Lila's wheelchair was an embarrassment, a symbol of weakness. While other mothers doted on their children, Veronica distanced herself, frustrated by Lila's needs and longing for the life she felt was slipping away. At first, it was subtle, the sighs, the impatient tones, the way Veronica brushed off her daughter's questions. But as months passed, the cruelty grew more visible. She began forcing Lila into uncomfortable exercises under the scorching sun, insisting that if the child just tried harder, she would be normal. Neighbors sometimes overheard Lila's sobs, but few dared to intervene, intimidated by Veronica's wealth and status. Every day became a battlefield for Lila, not only against her own frail body but against the coldness of the one person she longed to be loved by most, her own mother. And still, despite the pain, Lila clung to hope. She held tight to her father's memory, whispering prayers each night, begging for someone, anyone, to see her suffering and rescue her from the cage she could not escape. Meanwhile, life continued in the sprawling town, where wealth divided people into gilded cages of privilege and quiet corners of despair. And in that same town lived Daniel Hayes, a man who had everything money could buy. A successful millionaire, owner of multiple businesses, and admired by many, Daniel lived in a mansion not far from Veronica's estate. But though he was surrounded by opulence, his heart carried a hollow ache. Years earlier, he had lost his wife and unborn daughter in a tragic accident, and ever since, his life had been a storm of achievements masking emptiness. Daniel had long forgotten what it felt like to protect someone, to feel needed. He moved through his days with mechanical precision, his briefcase in one hand and a mask of composure on his face. But deep inside, the scars of his loss burned quietly, a reminder that love once lived within him, and was stolen too soon. Fate, however, has a way of weaving broken souls together. And on that searing afternoon, when Daniel's car turned into the driveway of Veronica's estate for a business meeting, he did not expect to see what he saw, a young girl, trembling on the pavement, her mother pouring water over her head as though punishment could wash away her struggles. His eyes widened in disbelief. Something inside him stirred violently, shattering the years of carefully constructed detachment. The memory of what it meant to be a father, the instinct to protect, surged through him. And that was when the word ripped from his chest with thunderous power, "Stop." Veronica froze, startled by the voice, while Lila gasped, her teary eyes locking onto the stranger who had appeared like a figure from her silent prayers. The air seemed to hold its breath. Daniel stepped out of his car, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel, his gaze burning with both anger and sorrow. He saw more than a mother and daughter, he saw cruelty, neglect, and a child desperate for love. In that instant, he knew he couldn't walk away. The silence that followed Daniel's outburst was heavy, almost suffocating. Veronica's perfectly painted lips parted in shock, her hand frozen in midair as the water bottle dripped its last few drops onto the stone. Lila, still kneeling, blinked through her tears at the men who stood tall and unwavering in the sunlight. For the first time in years, someone had stepped in, someone had seen her pain. Daniel's eyes bore into Veronica's. He had been in countless boardrooms, facing competitors and investors, but never had his voice thundered with such raw conviction. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his tone cutting through the summer air. Veronica, flustered, quickly tried to mask her cruelty with a brittle smile. She insisted she was merely motivating her daughter, helping her become stronger. But Daniel had seen enough in that single moment to know the truth. There was no love in her actions, only frustration and coldness. As Lila's small body shook, Daniel crouched beside her, his briefcase slipping from his grasp. He held out a steady hand, not forcing, just offering. For a moment, she hesitated. Trust was something she had learned not to give easily. But then, with trembling fingers, she reached out, and their hands met. A spark passed between them, not of lightning, but of recognition. Two souls broken in different ways, finding each other at last. That day did not end with shouting alone. Daniel, still shaken by what he had witnessed, excused himself from the business meeting entirely. Instead, he made a quiet vow to keep a watchful eye on Lila. At first, it was small gestures, checking in whenever he visited the estate for work, asking questions with genuine concern, and leaving small gifts he claimed were for the house but always seemed to end up in Lila's hands. And slowly, like the first fragile rays of dawn, hope crept into the girl's life. She began to look forward to his visits. His presence softened the harshness of her mother's cold walls. He was not her father, but something in his eyes reminded her of the love she once knew. When Daniel knelt beside her wheelchair and asked about her favorite books or listened to her stories about her father, she felt seen again, not as a burden, but as a child worthy of love. But change never comes without resistance. Veronica grew wary of Daniel's attention toward her daughter. Though she valued his business connections and wealth, she bristled at the way he seemed to undermine her authority. More than once, she scolded Lila after Daniel left, blaming her for making a fool out of the family. Each word was like a lash against Lila's fragile spirit. Daniel noticed. He saw the way Lila's eyes dimmed when her mother entered the room, how her laughter, so rare and precious, vanished like smoke when Veronica's shadow fell across her. He recognized the signs of a child caught in a cage, for hadn't he himself lived in one of grief and silence for years? The turning point came one rainy evening. Daniel had arranged to deliver some documents to Veronica personally, but when he arrived, he heard muffled cries coming from inside the grand house. The door was ajar, and though he knew it was not his place, his feet carried him forward. In the parlor, he saw a sight that made his blood run cold. Lila was on the floor, her wheelchair pushed aside, as Veronica towered above her, scolding her for embarrassing the family during a recent gathering where Lila had struggled to stand. The child's hands were pressed against the polished wooden floor, her body trembling as tears spilled freely. And again, her voice broke the air, "Please, Mommy, please stop." This time, Daniel did not hesitate. He stormed into the room, his voice booming with fury as he once more shouted, "Stop." The echo rattled the chandeliers, and for a split second, even Veronica was stunned into silence. He rushed to Lila's side, lifting her gently into his arms as though she were the most fragile treasure in the world. In that moment, Daniel realized something that shook him to his core. He had spent years amassing wealth, building empires, and hiding from the pain of his past. But here, in his arms, was a reason to live again. A reason to fight. A reason to use everything he had, not for profit, not for pride, but for love. From that night forward, Daniel refused to remain just an observer. He began visiting more often, bringing not only gifts but doctors and specialists to assess Lila's condition. He paid for treatments Veronica had long ignored, insisting that her daughter's life was not worth the effort. He sat with Lila through long therapies, cheering her on when her legs trembled, celebrating even the smallest progress. And through it all, Lila's trust deepened. She began to share pieces of her soul with him, the stories of her father, the loneliness she felt when other children ran freely while she struggled, and the dreams she still clung to. Dreams of walking in a garden, of dancing beneath the stars, of being loved without conditions. Daniel listened, his heart breaking and mending all at once. For the first time since the accident that had stolen his family, he felt his chest swell not with grief but with fierce determination. He could not bring back his wife or child, but he could give this little girl what she had been denied: love, safety, and hope. But Veronica did not yield easily. She resented Daniel's involvement, fearing that his bond with Lila would expose her cruelty. More than once, she tried to forbid him from coming, but Daniel was relentless. He reminded her that his investments kept her lavish lifestyle afloat, and he would not hesitate to withdraw if she stood in his way. Cornered by her own greed, Veronica allowed the visits to continue, though bitterness simmered in her heart. What she did not realize was that with each passing day, Daniel and Lila were weaving a bond stronger than anything she could control. The mansion that once echoed with cold silence now began to hold whispers of laughter, the faint hum of bedtime stories Daniel read when he stayed late, and the quiet prayers of a little girl who no longer felt alone. Still, the battle was not yet won. Darkness lingered in Veronica's heart, and Daniel knew it. He also knew that the road to healing was long, not only for Lila's fragile body but for her wounded soul. Yet for the first time, he felt certain that together, they could face it. Weeks turned into months, and the bond between Daniel and Lila grew unshakable. Each day, he poured his energy into helping her regain strength, not just in her fragile legs but in her spirit. Under the guidance of doctors and therapists, she slowly began to take more steps with support, her laughter breaking through the silence that had once haunted the mansion. To Daniel, every smile was a victory, every small step a triumph greater than any business success he had ever achieved. But Veronica's resentment only deepened. She could no longer control the narrative in her home, no longer manipulate her daughter into silence, for Daniel's presence had become a shield. The final confrontation came on a crisp autumn afternoon, the golden leaves swirling across the estate grounds. Lila had just managed to walk a few steps across the garden with Daniel cheering her on, his proud eyes glistening with tears. But from the terrace, Veronica's sharp voice cut through the moment like a blade. "This has gone too far," she snapped, her red heels striking against the stone. "You're filling her head with false hope, Daniel. She'll never be normal, and the sooner she accepts that, the better. Stop meddling in things you don't understand." Her words were cruel, slicing into the fragile progress Lila had made. The girl's shoulders slumped, and tears welled in her eyes, as though her mother's venom could unravel all the courage she had built. But before despair could swallow her again, Daniel stepped forward. This time, his voice did not simply shout, "Stop." It thundered with finality, with the power of a man who had lost everything once and refused to lose again. "No, Veronica. You stop. Stop tearing her down. Stop robbing her of hope. Stop treating your own daughter like a burden." The air crackled with the force of his words. Lila looked up at him, her small hands clutching his for strength. For once, Veronica faltered. Perhaps it was the fire in Daniel's eyes, or perhaps it was the dawning realization that she was losing control, but she could not summon her usual icy composure. Daniel turned to Lila then, kneeling so his eyes met hers. His voice softened, filled with a tenderness that shook her fragile heart. "Lila, you are strong. You are brave. And you are worth more than all the wealth and pride in the world. Don't ever let anyone make you believe otherwise." For the first time, Lila's tears were not just of pain, but of release. She leaned into his embrace, her tiny body trembling with a mix of relief and hope. And in that moment, Daniel made a silent promise to never let her feel alone again. The days that followed marked the beginning of a new chapter. Veronica, unable to withstand the pressure of Daniel's influence and the eyes of the community, who had begun to notice her coldness, gradually retreated from the role of a mother she had never truly embraced. Daniel, on the other hand, stepped forward more boldly, not just as a protector, but as the father figure Lila had long prayed for. With time, Lila's health improved. She still needed her wheelchair on difficult days, but her courage to try, to keep standing, grew brighter with each attempt. She blossomed under Daniel's care, her laughter filling rooms that once knew only silence. And though she still carried scars from her past, she no longer carried them alone. For Daniel, the emptiness that had once consumed him began to fade. In helping Lila, he had found a piece of himself he thought was gone forever, the part that loved, that protected, that found joy in the simple victories of a child's smile. In her, he found healing, and in him, she found the love she had been denied. The story of Daniel and Lila spread quietly through the community, whispered as a tale of unlikely compassion and second chances. People who once looked up to Veronica for her wealth now look to Daniel and Lila as a living reminder of what true strength meant. Not money, not appearances, but kindness, the kind that heals the loneliest hearts. Glowing star and dear viewer, if this story has touched your heart, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Glow. Every click, every share helps us continue to spread stories that remind the world of the power of love and compassion. Glowing star. Before we close, I want to leave you with this special request: comment below what kindness means to you. Your words may inspire someone else who desperately needs hope today. And so, from a driveway where a little girl once cried out for mercy to a garden where she now takes brave steps forward, this story reminds us of one powerful truth: sometimes, the greatest miracles happen when someone finally dares to shout, "Stop!" and chooses kindness instead.